Again, my name is Edgar. I am the principal and founding member of Officium, Latin for Service. And what I do is I do HR and career consulting. And so obviously today will be more on the career consulting side of my practice. And so as Fred mentioned, I received my JD from American University, Washington College of Law in 2009. I've been in the DC area for about 13 years now. And for most of my professional life, I've been in what I call the employment realm. So I started off doing employment law, did that for 9 years, including co-managing my own practice, where I represented both employees and employers in many aspects of employment litigation. In particular with my employee clients, which stem from federal employees, private sector, nonprofit sector, a lot of age claims that came up. And part of what I did as a lawyer was, as Eric, who also is a lawyer, would tell you, a lot of times you're not just doing law work, you're also helping people manage a very difficult time in their lives, whether they're staying in a really bad work environment or trying to transition out, whether it was planned, unplanned, on their own volition or not. And so oftentimes I would have many long conversations with clients about, what's the next step for me, and with older workers, it's a pretty precarious situation when you're trying to manage your career transition after particularly staying in a place for a very long time, and not having to think through, okay, well, what's my next move, and something that I'll go into is that the nature of the way people find work has changed tremendously in terms of the use of the internet and apps and the way you have to really market yourself in a different way than most people have been used to in the past. So this is some of the this is the reason why I do what I do, and what I try to emphasize in my work at Officium is that it's not just going over your resume and cover letter and helping with the job search. It's more than that. I essentially provide coaching and strategy sessions to clients. So we try to take your experience that you had before and leverage it into something new. So it's a very much a 360 process. So as I said, the situation for older workers can be pretty precarious right now. And I want to read over some stats with you all, just a couple of things before I continue. So we're a small group, so feel free at any point to ask questions, and have dialogue. I really love that. And also share your own personal stories. A lot of the examples I'll bring up, someone has probably experienced that. And if there's something not on here that you've seen before, please share with the group, because the goal is to provide information. And some of the best information is anecdotal, things you've seen happen to yourself or to someone that you know. The other thing is, now there are some questions I may not be able to address in the flow of my presentation, but certainly there should be enough time for Q&A, and also I'll be sticking around afterwards as well. If anyone has questions that maybe are a little more personal and don't want to ask in front of the group, but feel free to raise your hand anytime. So, as I was saying, people are working longer these days for many economical reasons that we don't have to get into, but I'm sure you're all aware. But it's not getting any easier for people with 40 to find work, particularly when you're in transition. And I think some of these statistics are good to read out, because I think it's good for it to settle in as to the current situation for older employees. So workers over 50, about 54 million Americans are now facing much more precarious financial circumstances. More than half of workers over 50 lose long-time jobs before they're ready to retire. Of those, 9 out of 10 never recover their previous earning power. Some can only find work piecemeal gig work. Older workers are much more likely to wrestle with prolonged joblessness than younger ones, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. On average, a 54-year-old job hunter will be unemployed for nearly a year. The number of Americans ages 65 and older would more than double from 46 million to over 98 million by 2060. It's estimated that by 2022, 27% of men and 7% of women ages 65 and older will be in the labor force, up from the 23% and 50% respectively. And I think this is also, the last is a big one, women over the age of 40 are the hardest hit by unemployment. So it's not just the fact that you're older, you're also a woman, that really, plays skews the numbers. And so I'm sure a lot of wondering, how does someone get past this stark reality in terms of the economic forces in the country. Now, what I will say is that there is a legal framework that is supposed to, in theory, protect older workers. The Age Discrimination and Employment Act, or the ADA, of 1967 prohibits employment discrimination against people over 40. And so it wasn't an original law of the Title VII. It was added on afterwards because Congress started to see that older workers are facing a lot of discrimination. And so that's the law of the country. And so if you ever feel that you've been discriminated against because of your age, you can file a claim with the EEOC. Okay? And also locally, DC, Maryland, and Virginia have laws in the books that also protect older workers. The small caveat being that in DC, it's not just 40 over, it's 18 over. So if you're 18, you're also protected under DC law. So just keep that in mind. But the issue that has come up since 2009 is that the ability to prove age discrimination has been weakened. There was a big Supreme Court case in 2009 called Gross v. FBO Financial Services, Inc., and the ruling imposed a higher burden of proof to prove age discrimination. The burden being that age was the deciding factor in an adverse action. So if you weren't hired for something or promoted or fired, which are all considered adverse actions, you have to prove that age was the deciding factor. With other forms of discrimination like race, gender, disability, the burden is not that high. It's either circumstantial evidence can be good enough if you have enough of it, but you don't have to have it used as a deciding factor. So it's made it very difficult because this day and age, not everyone, someone's not going to tell you your face, "Oh, I'm not going to hire you because you're old." Now that happens, and there are even recent cases where that has come up. But generally, that's not going to happen. No one's going to tell you, to your face. So how does one, prove that they're a victim of discrimination when going for a job interview, or not even being selected for a job for an interview when you are clearly qualified? How do you do that? And it's also put it's also affected the way people view the EEOC's ability to enforce the law. Since 2009. The EEOC enforcement of age discrimination cases has dropped, despite increases in complaints. So it's not as if people have stopped complaining about it, but the EEOC has certainly not enforced as much as other forms of discrimination. Any questions about?
Yeah. So this sounds kind of bad. Were they getting inundated by frivolous things that were, so hard? What do you really have to prove? That age was the single, is that the only part of the prima facie case?
It's not the only part, but so usually when in a discrimination case, there are four criteria you have to meet. One, you're part of the protected class. So I'm over 40 years old. Right. Was there an adverse action? Did I apply to something, or didn't get promoted, or whatever it is? So
I was like,
yeah, I applied to this job, I didn't get the job. That's an adverse action. Okay. Generally speaking, you just have to show that the decision made was because of your protected class. But you can do that in many ways. It can be direct. You're too old, I'm not going to hire you. That's a direct form. That's a direct example. Or it can be circumstantial. I applied to a job. The person that got the job is younger than me, and I'm more qualified. that can be enough to make a very convincing case that you were discriminated against in an age discrimination context.
But couldn't there have been a whole host of other reasons? And couldn't the company, for example, say, we felt this other individual was a better fit for our organization?
Yeah, and so in the framework, there's a burden shift. So the employer has to show that, no, there was a perfectly good reason or business reason why we made this hire. And then the complainant or the plaintiff has the last say and say, well, actually, no, here's why this is not the case. You can go back to unqualified. You can, there are many things you can use depending on the situation. But the thing is, in most cases, you can use circumstantial evidence. You don't need direct evidence anymore. It's very rare to get direct evidence cases because, again, people are smarter about their biases. They're not going to just, they'll tell you to your face. But with other forms of discrimination, you don't have to make it clear that it was because I'm of a different, ethnicity or if I'm a different gender. You can just show just by the way the employer acted. With age, you have to show that it was the deciding factor.
Right. So it's a higher standard.
It's a higher standard, yeah.
A much higher standard.
Right. And I think it goes into my next point in that with ageism in our country, culturally it's a lot more permissive. We make comments all the time about I've had a senior moment, or I forget things. I'm old. I forget things. It's so permissive in our culture that when you think about it, the law is a reflection of our society, and so a lot of judges or people who make the laws just don't see it as a problem as they may see like gender or race or national origin. So that's part of the issue, that we still accept ageism to be okay in many regards.
Would it be okay for the employer to say, we hired this younger person because of the enormous costs involved with hiring someone, and we need somebody who's going to be around for a longer period?
No.
No,
right, you can't do that. And I'm jumping a little bit, but I want to answer your question because it's important, because a lot of people think that you can use that as a basis in hiring, that we want someone to be here for a long time, when someone's not going to cost as much, not going to use a lot of health insurance, they're not going to be, maybe train them in certain things, but you can't do that. And you certainly cannot, that can't be a basis for why you make hiring decisions, and you can't bring that up in an interview. And you can't ask someone, for example, how long do you intend to be here? That's an illegal. That's a goner. Done for.
Wait, how much can I get?
So certainly when you're in an interview, if you are lucky to get that far, you have to look out for those things. They can't ask you about how long you intend to be at a certain place or what kind of benefits you're looking for. What benefits you anticipate, or when are you going to retire? You can't ask that. You can't ask that stuff. And that's and if that's as direct as you can get with age discrimination. If someone's asking those questions, or even in an application, you can't ask that.
But how do you prove that person asked me this? It could be word against word, right?
Well, I don't want to get into the weeds of, but I can answer that. Obviously you cannot, you probably should not, tape record your interviews. Couldn't be DC, I guess, but not in Maryland. But you can take notes in an interview, and again, it's part of the proof scheme, right? If you have other evidence, like who do they hire, instead of you? What does the demographics of the workplace look like? Does it skew younger? That could be damning evidence. One thing that came up in my research is that a lot of companies, they really promote this idea of, oh, we hire millennials, and look at the website, all these like flashy young people and smiling, and that could work against someone if if their hiring practices are not compliant with the law. Yeah, so it's part of the bigger picture, and with litigation, it's never just one thing, particularly in the employment discrimination context. Yeah.
How do you know the reason you are not chosen or not hired? Usually they don't say, it's a black hole, they don't call you back. How do you know why you are not?
Yeah, that's a good question, and sometimes one can never know. But what I usually tell people is you can always ask. You can depending on the employer, if it's like not like a big company, but somebody you can like talk to, a person you actually talk to, you can ask. You can say, hey, thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to know what are things I can work on my application, or why wasn't I hired. You can ask, and that's okay. I mean, of course, you have to use your judgment, of course, but you can ask that question. But also, pay attention to the postings and the announcements and what's asked of you, because that would give you a sign as to whether or not there might have been a discriminatory practice involved. When I practice law, through age cases, a lot of times I would ask about these things, like, well, what did the job announcements say? If you get an interview, okay, great. What kind of questions they ask you? Let's look. Do you know who got hired in your place? Let's look at this person's resume. Can you find them on LinkedIn? Let's compare your credentials to theirs. So obviously, without advanced reason, you don't. I mean, the court's not gonna, make a fine, or the EEOC for that matter, make a finding that it's discriminating against. But if it's pretty much here, you might have something there.
Thanks.
Well, any other questions? Yeah, so as I was telling before, aging is not taken seriously. It's a pretty lax standard in the way we treat older workers. So there are a lot of negative stereotypes about older workers that are so tolerated and accepted, particularly stray remarks or office banter. There's this misconception that older workers are in physical and mental decline, that they are more likely to be outperformed by younger counterparts. In fact, one of the articles I read in researching this said that the encyclopedia version of older age is physical and mental decline. So this goes to show you how ingrained in our society ageism is. Other stereotypes that can lead to age discrimination include the belief that older workers are more accident prone. So slip and fall, and that might hike up a workers' comp insurance coverage, for example, more days off because of the perception that older workers just have more health needs, or less intelligent. The idea that if you're an older worker, you don't keep up with technology, or again, your mental decline, just can't hang, and also this perception that older workers are less flexible or harder to teach new things. It's something that when I was practicing, and even just in terms of people I talk to, it comes up all the time. I would say this third point is the most prevalent I've experienced in my professional career when speaking with clients and people in general. And then, as I said before, many firms today, unfortunately, are trying to promote this image of skewing younger, in the way they hire and present themselves, and so that is sort of what we're up against, despite the legal frameworks provided to protect older workers, conflated with the economic challenges that older workers face because they have to work more in this day and age without many protections. Yes?
At the risk of interrupting your presentation
No.
again, I want to ask about the last paragraph there specifically, and then a more general point.
Yeah.
So that last one, what is that? What is that based on? How is that measured? Is that based on like surveys of companies? Is that based on looking at where recruiting budgets are spent? Or
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah,
based on?
it's based on where people are recruiting. Again, as I said before, even if you look at just think about, for example, the tech industry.
Right.
You know, it's very, that's probably we're going to be up in tech industry a lot today, but the tech industry has made it a point to emphasize youth, the idea that youth and innovation are together, the idea of being a digital native, which I'll talk about in a second. And so, like,
Well, and one large tech company, I mean, this motto of move swiftly and break things,
Yeah.
those are both sort of skewed. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, exactly. So just think about the message you get, from anecdotally from tech companies primarily.
Stuff, I guess. Sorry.
Okay. But just even look at some websites, startups, even in the startup community now, whether it's in tech or not in tech, there's just this perception that, we have to be younger and innovative and fun and all that stuff, So I think that it's the eye test to me, anecdotal and also numbers. I got this from a study in an article where they looked at this.
And partly why I was asking is because I think it is. I mean, so I'm over 50,
Yeah.
and I would say broadly speaking, amongst my friends, associates, both people that I used to work with, that I still interact with,
Yeah.
social friends, it's so from the department of two things can both be right at the same time.
Yeah.
I think there is discrimination going on, but it's also easy for somebody my age to fall into a trap of assigning everything to discrimination, and that's why I asked that question.
Oh, that's a good. And that's a very
Is that
good.
really
Yeah. That's a very good statement.
level we think it is?
Yeah, no, that's a very good statement. And when I talk about ways you can leverage yourself, some of the tips I'll be giving, can apply to anyone, quite frankly. Anyone, whether you're starting your career or are more senior, you can apply some of these tips and techniques. I think that for older workers, depending on where you are, because not everyone's the same, and the statistics and everything I'm talking about, of course, there are people who are well into their careers who are still, doing fine and never had to really deal with, ageism, or if they do, they've been able to get past it, However, I would say that I don't think the numbers lie. I can also even speak from anecdotal experience that it's a problem, and I think the scary thing is that baby boomers are getting older. You're going to have an influx of older workers, and with the post-gig economy and the idea of that people want to pay employees and want an independent contract, it just adds a whole different element that I think you should pay attention to. And if there's not a movement now to change the way we view older workers, my fear is that it will become a true social issue. That it's already now one that can be even worse.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on your comment about that paragraph. I recently read an article about Silicon Valley. I used to be a headhunter in Silicon Valley in the early 80s. However, today, if a person's 35 and they're looking for a job in Silicon Valley, they're considered too old.
Right.
So part of it is, the industry, et cetera.
Right.
So yes, they're looking to hire people in their 20s.
Yeah.
The other thing is, another article states that the average age, or the average time a professional stays in the job is generally 3.5 to 4 years. So there's a lot of movement,
Right.
going in and out
Right.
of these jobs, especially in these high-tech environments. So that's just part of
I
it.
think you had something to say. We can go.
Yeah.
So Ed, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, I just lost my job about 5 weeks ago. So I've been in this process of earnest of putting my resume out there. There just happen to be lots of jobs opportunities in my field, which is great. So, look, I've been working over 35 years. And so when you see something for a job that says 10, 15, 20 years experience, clearly you're over the threshold. And I'm of the belief that there's virtually nothing virtually nothing in my field that I cannot do or I cannot learn if I haven't actually done it for whatever reason.
Right.
So when I send out my resume, and I think unlike a younger person who may, say, I'm going to go for the same, although I don't really think I have a shot. Going into it, if you think you have a shot to actually at least get a phone call or at least get something. So I'm going to say I sent out 30 of these things thus far. Realistically, I've heard from 2. And I'm already at the irritation stage because, seriously, because when I talk to professionals who see my resume in PR or, that do career counseling, they're like, you have impressive credentials, okay? So I'm not taking this from myself, I'm taking it from other people, but yet, thus far 2 out of 30. When I saw, part of the reason I came there when I saw what you did, I want to talk about this because it's great to actually get the call, but what if you're not even able to get interest on the notion that this person's overqualified? Because that's the other way, as a communicator, we know other terms that are used to say you're overqualified.
Yeah, that's a common one. Yeah.
Yes, how do you know I'm overqualified? Just because I may want a lot more money than the person than what you're willing to pay. You don't know my circumstances. And so that's the frustration I'm already starting to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'd like, if you can maybe address that somehow.
Yeah. So, you're right. One of the biggest problems that anyone has when doing the job search is getting an interview, right? And I think it's complicated by the fact that if you're over a certain age, it gets worse. One thing that I tell a lot of people is job posts is one facet of the job search. I'm of the opinion that, for the most part, most people, not everyone gets a job through a job post.
Right.
Sometimes it works, and I think a lot of times you're putting in. Think about it. You already put 30 applications out, and your yield is 2, right? 2 callbacks. We've not been talking about interviews yet and going through the process, right? So just managing that. I believe that particularly this day and age, the way that the job search has morphed into is something a little more faster than that. And so a couple of things I'll talk about is, and I think particularly if you're a senior professional, is monetizing your experience. So it's not necessarily that you have to start your own business, let's go that far, but to be a little more entrepreneurial in the way that you market yourself. Because I believe that this day and age, yes, you still have to do the old-fashioned resume, cover letter. I would say LinkedIn profile is not old school, but it's things ingrained in the culture. I think most people now know that I have to have my LinkedIn profile, set up properly. But I think also it's okay. Well, if you have a certain experience, how are you marketing that? Are you doing blogs? Do you have a social media platform or a strategy that particularly you produce things? Can people see your work? Who are you meeting? Are you keeping up with your contacts? I find that the idea of keeping up with your contacts is, I think people are starting to employ now, that you haven't really seen in the past. But that's really important because someone like you who's been in the industry for 35 years, think about how many contacts you have, right? Plenty, right? And that's something you can leverage because at a certain point, particularly when you're not in your 20s anymore, like sometimes your jobs come from someone that says, hey, I know this guy, I've known him for 20 years, he's excellent, I'm gonna hire this guy, and sometimes you really go into the interview process, it's sort of, you're at dinner and it's a napkin offer, right?
Sure, right.
Yeah, so.
I agree with that. I thought about the monetization thing.
Yeah.
and there's some things I'm thinking, someone else kind of told me the same thing. The one thing I'll say is it's a little difficult. My wife's a realtor.
Yeah.
We have 3 kids, and so time's an issue. I mean, I'm home, and, unfortunately, there's other stuff that has to be done.
Yeah.
And so that's not always conducive
Yeah.
to, you got to live your life
Yes.
as well, so.
Yeah.
And I'm not making an excuse, but.
No,
I think-
you're absolutely right. There are challenges to it, because not everyone has that, personality. Some people can walk into a room and work the room, shake hands, slap backs, and
Well, that's me.
Yeah,
Some people are like, you haven't moved from the spot in an hour. I'm like, because people come to me. Because I know
That's
people.
good.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's when I know people.
Yeah,
That's when I know people.
but increasingly, I think there's this sort of gray area in the job search where you have to have a little bit control of your own destiny.
Yeah.
I've seen people monetize their experience, and they might reach out to someone and say, look, I've done this for 20 years. If you want me to come in and be a mentor to your staff people who are a little more less seasoned, I can do that. And sometimes that turns into a job offer. If someone says, hey, I really like working with this person, he relates, he's part of the team, hey, let's bring him on, let's find him something. And so it's that level of creativity you used to have now than I had before, because in my HR consulting world, I see that now there is a big culture in terms of everyone wanting to be an entrepreneur. I think, I don't know the numbers off the hand, but the amount of small businesses that are being created every day has increased. I would say that a large part of the employer, potential employee pool is small business owners. But the problem is they don't always want to pay people as employees. Don't always want to get benefits. And increasingly what they look for people are not entrepreneurial, in their approach. So I think that's at least, this is my opinion, of course. I'm not saying this with any sort of ultimate authority, but that's what I'm seeing. Because I do the HR and career consulting side. That's what I'm seeing.
And do you see that there are certain groups, like I'm really interested in knowing, the 2 that did call you back were those smaller companies that really need people who can hit the ground running, and they need experience because they can't afford to train people. Maybe I remember going fishing once with this guy who later became a semi-pro at fishing, and I caught more fish than I ever caught before my whole life because he knew where to fish.
Right.
He knew what to use to fish, and I could blame myself on ignorance because I didn't know anything about fishing.
Those fish were discriminating against you.
They didn't like my worm or whatever I was using.
Yeah.
But the fact is, if you're fishing in the right ponds, using the right tools, and working, together, I think it makes it a lot. I mean, it's harder, right? When you get, we're not going to say it's not harder, but it's not impossible. You just have to really know strategic. I think you and I were talking earlier about the strategic component of the job search, and that's what's really important as you age. You have to be, you have to know who's going to value you more, and then focus in those ponds.
Yeah, and I would say, taking the career consulting world, there are a lot more people now who are attuned to this. That are, it's not just again the resume. It's talking about who's in your world, that you can leverage as a potential relationship. What groups are you involved in? And not necessarily have leadership roles, but are you going to these events? Where you might meet people. And that stuff matters. And there are people out there that can help you, including myself. but there are people who can help you kind of. Put together a strategy. Because you're right. Time. You have 3 kids. You have things you got to do. So you don't. And certainly when you're trying to put together something that you're not even familiar with, you might need someone to help you understand what the best strategy is for you, more importantly, because what might work best for you given your attributes or your experience level or comfort level might not work for someone else, and having someone that could, play on your strengths. Because, for example, I work with introverts a lot. They don't like to go to happy hours. They don't like to, be, out there like that. But, you say, okay, well, maybe do informational interviews, go to dinner with someone. Maybe that's the way you tell your story and sell yourself. And another tip I would say is, just stop doing what you want to do. Don't be ashamed to go anywhere. Grocery store, line, networking event, dinner. Just tell people what's happening in your life. What are you looking for? You just never know when your next opportunity will come from. So. Any other questions? Oh, yes, you had a question. Yes.
This goes back to something you referenced a moment ago. When people are hiring now, are they looking for someone who's going to stay with them for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
That's a good question.
It used to be 20 years, but now I think it's shorter.
I think most people would say that they're not expecting people to stay 20 years anymore. That I think employers also understand that in this day and age, people move. People change geographic regions, they want to go somewhere else, they move. Now, obviously, it's not something you bring on an interview. You don't say, I'm only being here for 3 or 5 years. No, you don't say that.
People do ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So what kind of...
I would keep it vague. I would never tip your hand on that. And I have some language that you can use, but I think it's more important to emphasize your excitement for the role, and why you want to be there, than to give an answer about how long you expect. Well, first we shouldn't be asking that. So that's a starter.
That's a common question.
Just shouldn't be asking that.
That's a standard interview question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I would probably tell someone, you stay away from it. It's just not it. It could just lead to all types of potential issues, particularly not a scripted interview, just like going off the cuff. You start talking, and next thing that's my retirement plans, and But if asked that question, I would keep it vague and just talk about your excitement for the job, why you want to be there, why it's important to you, why does it fit within your, your reasons for applying. Yeah.
Can I answer
Yeah,
that?
of course.
Yeah, I mean, that question offers no real information, about who you are and where you want to be. I used to tell people if they were asked that question to say, I want to be in your job. If you hire me, I'm going to make you look so good that you'll be promoted, and I'll be in your job. So that's,
What was that?
I'll be in your job.
You're saying that
5 years from now.
That's what you want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a cheeky answer, but,
No,
it doesn't
You
really.
didn't say you want to be in their job. What you said is, I'm going to get you promoted.
Right, because if
That's
you hire
what
me,
it
if
says.
you hire me, I'm going to make you look so good
Yeah.
that yes.
You want me on your team, right?
You'll be on the team. However, back to that 3.5, 4 years in a job, it actually, people, if you're in a position 10, 15, 20 years, you go to apply for another company, the question is how much, are you behind the times in what you know? So people are making career moves more frequently to keep up with progress in their given profession. So it's really more the employee making the decisions about making career moves than the employer, as it should be at this point, because things change so quickly in certain industries that you have to keep on top of the changes.
One reason I ask is because I'm in healthcare advocacy, political advocacy, and both in political advocacy and healthcare, they have grant-funded positions that might be 1 or 2 year positions or even 6 month positions, or they're working within some specific guidelines about hours per week and the duration of the project. Political advocacy right now, we're coming up on the 2020 elections, and so it's the information exchange that I'm going to be going to, whether I'm just networking for coffee or it's a formal interview, is to find out to let them know that if it's a 1-year position or a 6-month position, I'm open to that because I do freelancing anyway, and I'm open to a short-term position or a contract hire position. At the same time, if they're onboarding in a more permanent way, I'm open to that as well. So I wanted to let them know I have that flexibility. I want to tease out what exactly they have available because typically people don't like to show all their cards at once.
Yeah. You know, and particularly in DC, where it happens a lot, where it's a 1-year position or based on the grant. Yeah, I would say let the employer drive that conversation. So if it's in writing, then you know clearly that, okay, I have to, this is for 2 years, and I have to start looking after a year and a half, for example. But I would never tell someone to answer if they ask you what you see. So I wouldn't tell someone to, tip their hand and say, "Oh, I'm always expected to be here for 3 to 5 years." You just say that, just especially excited for the position that I want to be here. Here's why, and clearly, of course, if it says in the announcement that it's for a set period of time, then you know that going in. There's not there won't be any confusion about that.
Yeah, sometimes people they don't give out all the information at once because we all network together. If you're not right for one position or the organization not right for me, nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings because we're all part of a larger networking. And also sometimes I'll get a call from someone I met 6 months ago or a year ago and said, you were our second choice and we went with someone else, but now we have something. Are you still available?
Yeah, that's fine.
And so I do want to keep the door open for that.
Yeah.
I don't know when to be too pushy for information and when to be too vague.
So if there's a concern that, look, I think it's okay if you're in a job interview, or even if you're trying to find out about a position, you can ask. Particularly if again, I think with these things, it's always use your best judgment. But if you're in a role where you may have seen before, okay, this only lasts. They said grant. What is that? Obviously, there's a grant involved that can kind of take a finite, time frame. So I think it's okay in those situations to ask. Hey, I noticed there's a grant. Is this grant, for a set period of time, or is it renewed every year? Just so I have an idea, what to expect. I think it's okay to ask that, but I think just use your best judgment. I think my general rule is don't go into that world. Because I think it just can lead to all sorts of issues or misunderstandings. But obviously, if you hear some magic words of grant, or it's in the announcement, you can say, "Hey, I see here that the position's for 2 years. Is there room for an extension of that, or is it a tight 2 years?" You can ask that, but I wouldn't bring it up just to bring it up. That would be my general advice. And so if you ask that question, how long do you expect to be here, I wouldn't answer the question directly. I wouldn't do it.
Is it okay to ask them, are you planning on eliminating this role anytime soon? And throw it back on them, and then you're engaging in a conversation. Like, hey, I'm here looking for a place where I can be for a while, but I want to understand your needs, and then you can direct the conversation in the right direction. So Tom's a little more aggressive than me. I would like to say, I want to prepare myself to be ready to move up and make myself a valuable contributor. And I do this, and then I focus on letting them know that I keep myself current. So, always put a positive spin on these things, because there's going to be, a question like that is clearly designed. They have 200 people that are trying to whittle it down to one. I can get rid of.
My response would be, you don't have to ask it. Just say it. Just say, I want to be here for a long time. Here's why. You don't have to. You don't have to ask the question.
Well, I like to ask the question to throw them off guard, because the because you have to get some bargaining power throughout the interview, and if you startle somebody, you're like, oh wait, what, and you can start to control and move that discussion in a positive light, because that's really what you want to do in an interview. You want, and you plus, guess what? You want them to remember you. and I'm not doing
His
it.
advice, not mine.
Yeah, it's not my advice. But I'm not telling them. I'm just trying to be, and you have to be sincere in the way it's a little bit of Hollywood here, But you want to make sure that you're remembered, but in a positive way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw them off guard, and then I'm going to start talking about all the positive things that we can help. I'm going to help them envision the future with me, and of course I'm going to be a part of that future as I'm envisioning. So it's a screen act question. We all know that. Your job is to turn it into hey, I'm the person you really want because I can engage in meaningful discussions. That's just my technique. Again, Edgar doesn't necessarily recommend the guy in the front, but everybody's their own person. But
Yeah.
I saw something lately, a benefit for applicants that would help them pay down their student loans, which I think is great. And student loans, anybody of any age could have student loans. But it seems to skew towards, and it was obviously aimed at younger people. Does there need to be, is that discriminatory, or does there need to be another benefit that's open to people who don't have?
That's a good question. No, obviously it's not legal advice, but I'm on the fence on that because look, anything can be discriminatory. It's just based on the facts and the other circumstances involved. So I've never encountered a situation where someone sued or came to me. I don't know, Erica, if you've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think that alone would be enough. But if you have another person who is a lot younger, a lot less qualified, if you have pictures on their website of all the young people, that's just another piece of evidence to help show that website is discrimination. But on its own, probably not.
Yes.
One organization I'm looking at, it's very youth oriented. I know they're millennial oriented. I'm meeting with them tomorrow, and I know they're hiring, but they have like the senior citizens as like these are our older, but like they definitely address members of the community as according to age segments. And my thought is that things should be more integrated. And there's definitely the entrepreneur attitude there. And I don't know how to, I know it's something that's going to be going on in Vermont, and I don't know how to, say in a positive way that I move across all age groups, and I see the need to build bridges, and I think I'm a good person to do that. I don't know how to bring that up without sounding like, without making the age more of an issue, instead of pointing out that I can build bridges.
In that regard, because obviously you want to show an employer that you can work in a team, and diversity particularly. I would use language like experience levels. I can work with all types of people, all types of experience levels. I work with people more junior, more senior. To me, you want to maybe say it that way than to focus on age. Because I think it just makes again, you don't want to create any miscommunications or misperceptions in the interview, which can be very easy to do because they're highly subjective at the end of the day. As much as people emphasize resume, your experience and wherever you worked, if you walk in and someone doesn't like your tie, they can make a decision not to hire you just based on the way you dress. Which in DC could be illegal, but there. But someone could say, I didn't like the fact that he brings tie on. He's off the pile. So you want to avoid things that can, make things murky. They're taking the eyes of the person who has to make a selection on your resume. Yeah, let's go this way.
I was going to say, a lot of our language is based on the years we grew up in this country because language has changed so much. but I've got a lot of friends in the LGBTQ community, and I emphasize the Q, because we were having these meetings where they would address everyone as ladies and gentlemen, and some people said, can we just say people?
Mhm.
And I was like, but you're either a man or a lady, right? No. There are people who don't identify themselves with certain genders today. And so the question came to me, well, the first time it happened, I was like, oh gosh, I didn't know I was offending him. But now that I do know that, I choose to use more inclusive language. And it's just that simple in today's society, because a lot of us who are older, we don't realize that we say dear. I say dear to women sometimes when they do a service for me. And that's sexist. And I had no idea. I thought holding the door was being chauvinistic, but some people, they want equality and they don't care about that old stuff. So it's just a matter of me being more flexible and adjusting to how I'm communicating, because I can't control how they can receive it, but I can try and be less offensive in certain ways.
A word to the previous comment, go ahead.
So we have 10 minutes, so I want to actually get through some other stuff, and then we can have more time to talk. Yeah, I promise I'll get to questions. I just want to make sure I get to the heart of the presentation, which is examples of discriminatory hiring practices, and I will get to questions, I promise. And some of this came up during the course of the presentation today, but these are the most prevalent you'll see out there. So specifying in a job posting that the organization seeks digital natives. So what does digital native mean? It means someone probably born in 1990 or so that has, seen, has worked with certain software, can do social media. Like they, my sisters, for example, all they know is social media and computers. I remember a time when computers weren't really a thing. I did book reports without a computer. So that's what digital native means, that you were born at a time and you grew up in a like Paul, who actually is a digital native, and he knows nothing but social media and phones, and smartphones, and things of that nature. So if you see that, or anything that kind of emphasizes digital native or familiar with technology or social media, that might be a sign that the person is against hiring an older worker. Another example is recruiting for entry-level positions only on college campuses. That happens a lot, quite frankly. Requiring a college-affiliated email address to apply to a job opening. I didn't realize that was a thing, but it is. So obviously, if you've been in the working world for a long time, you're not going to be using your your college email. So that's another sign of the hiring practice. The fourth one's a big one, using algorithms for online job applications that screen out older applicants. I'm sure most of you have been following the news, and artificial intelligence is becoming a huge influence in recruitment and hiring. Recently there was one company that came up with a way to screen candidates by facial recognition, and so essentially what it does is when you're interviewed, an employer can study the way how your face reacts to certain questions, what kind of words are you using, everything, and it's becoming an issue, because there's a question as to, well, what are these algorithms based off of? Is it based off of a certain type of demographic or not, and who has access to be able to practice for these things? So AI is becoming a huge thing, and certainly with some programs now, if the algorithm is set to not select certain people of a certain date of birth, your application may never see the light of day with an employer. So I would really pay attention to this, because this is becoming more of an issue, and I definitely think there'll be lawsuits over it in the next couple of years. Also, capping the number of years of work experience sought in applicants, so such as stipulating that you should have no more than 10 years of experience. That's apparently a way that employers try to limit who can apply. So I've seen as low as 5 years or 2 years in some job announcements, so pay attention to that. Some job applications use a date of birth drop-down menu without an applicant's birth year listed. I think that's very cruel. But essentially, if it's an all application and you have to put your date of birth and you don't see anything past 1970, they're basically trying to shut you out. And I think it's very cruel, but it happens. Another one is, we've touched upon this, words like overqualified can be coded for too expensive, or we're afraid you'll get bored and quit. I've heard the too expensive one, the we're afraid you'll get bored and quit. I haven't heard that much, but apparently that's also a common misconception that if you're older or more qualified, that you'll just like up and leave, which I don't think is always the case. We also touch upon this one, in corporate culture described as fun, can suggest a workplace for the young. So we talked about that, we can go into more details. Certainly, if you ask about your age or retirement plans, so again, to re-emphasize, you cannot be asked about your age on a job interview or an application, and you cannot be asked when you're going to retire. You cannot ask those questions. If someone asks you those questions, you should write it down, you should underline it, and call a lawyer immediately. Particularly if you don't get the job. They cannot do that. And then the last one, which is also a big one, is social media job posts that specifically alienate older workers. I don't know if anyone's been following what happened with Facebook recently. So Facebook would allow employers to put up job announcements on Facebook that only targeted white men of a certain age, age 18 to 35. And actually, when you click, if you're the recipient of that ad, you click on it, it'll tell you why you received that ad. It'll tell you in black and white, you received this ad because you're a white male between the ages of 18 and 35. And so Facebook got in a lot of hot water for that. They actually had to stop. They had to stop the practice, and employers who were doing it got sued and had to set. And I think there's a big settlement out of that. So Facebook says they're not going to do it anymore, but look out for that because Facebook's not the only game in town when it comes to social media. So just keep that in mind. Any questions?
Yeah, just for a on some of these things, you don't necessarily have a lot. It appears that you don't have a recourse. Like the algorithm thing, you're not going to. What's the recourse or the accountability for companies, agencies, whatever that do some of these things?
Well, here's the thing, and I think with Facebook again because that was a concerted effort by the law firm that was involved. And just also, people care about employment rights to look out for this stuff. And so, with the algorithm thing, I think time will tell. But with AI particularly rearing its head in the way people recruit and hire, I expect that there are going to be a lot of lawsuits and legislative acts taken either on the state level or in Congress, hopefully, to adjust this stuff. So this is the algorithms and the AI are new. I mean, we're entering a brand new world when it comes to this. So I couldn't tell you where this might go. But I think the Facebook example is maybe a good way to kind of foresee what might happen. Because that was a concerted effort, that when there was years in the making. Yes?
Could you please advise how to handle illegal questions without blowing the interview or straining the relationship with your interviewer by saying, hey, that's illegal?
Yeah. I'll get to that in a moment. I'll cover that in like 2 seconds. Any other questions before I move on about this particular slide? Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
Okay, so where it says that they cannot cap the number of years, but they can say you have to have at least 10 years. They can say that. But
they shouldn't. They shouldn't say that because if they cap it, then if you're like most people say, oh, only 10 years experience. Well, I have more than 10. Should I apply? Should I not apply? And it just makes it very murky, because clearly they're trying to look for a certain type of job candidate. If they cap it, what should be the way you say it is, at least a certain amount, so maybe a baseline level, but you're clearly willing to accept someone who has simply more than that. But the idea is that you cannot discriminate against people applying to a job. You can look if you get a whole bunch of candidates and you can make a business decision as to why you hired someone, fine. So it is, right? But the idea is that you want equal opportunity, in terms of who can apply and who can be considered.
Okay.
So yeah.
I just have one small
Yeah,
question.
yeah, she has 2 questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
My second question was, you said they can't ask you about your age, but I would say, maybe I'm wrong, but I've been filling out applications online and probably half of them have asked me to enter my birthday.
Yeah, again, they probably shouldn't. The thing with hiring practice is that, like, as much as people like myself will talk about it, it's rampant. Some of the small things people do and don't even think about. Like for example, sometimes when I was applying to things, people ask, well, where are you from? In a job interview, which seems very innocuous. But I'm not American. I'm Cameroonian, and so if I say that, who am I to know if that person decides, well, he's Cameroonian? You shouldn't ask that. Because it can just lead to all sorts of, misconceptions.
I've found that the interview or the online applications are really intrusive. Just for a lot of really personal information, like social security number. I've even been asked for that for some of the bigger corporations
they
that I've been
shouldn't.
looking at. So I don't know.
Technically, they shouldn't. Technically, they should not be doing that, but it happens.
Okay.
And some of those online postings they're doing market research. So that's why, we teach to go through the hidden job market as opposed to going on it online.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I see something like that, then that's kind of I don't spend as much time on it because I'm thinking, that's probably for market research purposes because they want to know how to word things to get, they want.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we keep going. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
And I promise to stay around to answer any question anyone has. So tips to increase your marketability as a job candidate, and we covered a lot of this. Stay current in the industry. Wherever it is. Whatever the journal is in your industry, get that journal or that email listserv. Particularly now with the internet, there are tons of communities out there, digital communities you can join, Meetup, or have you join them. Meet those people. Because not only are you staying on top of the latest technology or best practices in your industry, but you're meeting the people in the industry that might be able to hire you someday. Or give you an introduction that leads to a job, or whatever the case might be. So I think this day and age that's really important, and I think certainly if you're just entering the job market, but even if you're even more seasoned, I think it's just really important you do this. And certainly if you're behind something, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's super important this day and age. So more tips, and I promise I know it's a little small, so I'll go through this one by one. Oh, sorry. And this mostly covers the resume. And again, some of the advice is for everybody, but keep the resume up to date. If you haven't looked at it in a while or haven't really updated it, you should update it. And it's okay to have several types of resumes. You might have a resume for this type of job or for that type of job. I usually recommend that you have a CV, which is everything you've done in your life, and then from there you cut it down to a page. Best is to have a page. If you're going for something a little more higher level, then 2 pages might be okay. Particularly have like skills or speaking engagements you want to highlight. But you should always be looking at your resume, updating it. Maybe have several versions of it depending on the job you're looking for. If you graduated from college more than 2 decades ago, don't list your graduation dates. Also, with any entry-level positions, you can leave that in, maybe the first one. But again, depending on what jobs you're going for, or how many jobs you've had, you have to make decisions about which ones you use for a certain job, for certain jobs. Okay. On page. Now, also another tactic I've used for resumes is if you have a lot of job experience, you can create a section where you kind of go into, I call it usually additional experience or what have you, and you can just list, the jobs you've had. You don't have to talk about what you didn't know. Just list, I worked here as this from this and the date, and just list them. That way you save space, and you can show that you have a lot of experience without, going over, 3 or 4 pages on your resume. And then same for the objective or executive summary. If you have that section in your resume, that's where if you had like a gap in employment, you can explain why you've had that gap, or whatever objectives you have in terms of why you're applying for a certain position, but limit it to only 2 sentences max. Okay. Very quickly, and this covers mostly if you get a job interview, and we covered some of this. If asked how long you intend to stay in a respective position, again, do not answer that. Again, talk about why you're excited about the role, what you're looking to accomplish in the role, and et cetera, et cetera. And also articulate why you want to work for a particular employer. And I think that is super important when you're more advanced in your career, to really explain why. Especially if you're going for a role that might be a downgrade, from something you've done in the past. I think it's fair for an employee to want to know why. And you can just say, look, I want to see my grandkids more. Or I just want more time. I don't want to have to manage things anymore. Work 8-hour weeks. You can say that stuff in a job interview, but it's important to have a game plan. Like a question like that, you shouldn't be caught flat-footed in a job interview. You have to be prepared to articulate why you want a certain role, particularly if you're, taking a job that's for less pay, or maybe outside of what you've done, per your resume. I think it's also important to provide clear examples as to problems you've solved in the past. And I think this is important because when you're a experienced professional, you've seen a lot in your life. When I had a law firm, one of my favorite things to do was to hire older of counsels. People who have been doing it for like 15, 20 years, maybe even more, because it tended to be the adult in the room. Where, you're frantic, you think you made this crazy mistake, and they can say, actually, I've seen this before, not that big of a deal. This is how we solve it. You want to bring that to the table. Because you'll be surprised how much employers appreciate that. Because the last thing they're going to do, particularly if they're the ones that are also doing the job interview and also running the company, they want someone who can take that pressure off of them. Someone that can say, hey, you talk to so and so, they can help you, walk through this. Or we have this crisis, how do we deal with it? If you can talk about the situations where you've had to deal with crises or solve problems, that's really key. Particularly when you have a full resume or full experience. At the same time, toe the line between how much you talk about your experience. You don't want to inundate someone with everything in your life. And this is advice that I would tell anyone. Let the interviewer ask the questions and you answer them. And where you can, leverage that experience. Because no one wants to know it all on their team. So really important that you moderate how much experience you give. Highlight the ones that are most important for the job you're applying to. And ultimately, just emphasize, what value you bring. If you can articulate why you will be valuable to a company, how you'll save them money or enhance something they do, it not only shows that you've done your research and really thought about it, and you're someone that is thoughtful and forward prepared, but at the end of the day, when someone's hiring someone, they want someone that can add value to the company and that can help them make money or save money. Okay. Any questions?
There was that one question you had I thought was really good. How do you not torpedo the interview when you're asked something that's improper?
Yeah, so I would say don't show any emotion. Don't, it's okay to write notes. You can have a notepad ready just as practice, and you can just casually just write it down. what they ask you, but I would certainly say that if, like, the common thing is they'll ask you how long you want to be there, you should be prepared for that. If they, I'm trying to think of another comment they'll ask you. Oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of questions are personal.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Like, what religion are you, or are you married, or those kinds of questions? Yeah, they're illegal questions. And what I've advised people to do is to answer it in this fashion. Could you explain to me how that question is relevant to the job?
Well, my worry is taking off the interview and you're saying this is...
No, what you're doing, well, but you're getting out of it in an easy way, and hopefully the interviewer will realize, well, that was kind of a stupid question, and move on to something else. But that's, the questions in an interview should be related to the job.
Yeah.
That's the goal of the interview. And it should be not an interrogation, but a dissemination of information between the candidate and the person interviewing. So that's what you want to establish in the interview.
Sometimes they will intentionally ask, offensive questions to test you.
Yes.
To see how you respond in various, etc. So appreciate that level to it. That they weren't born yesterday. They know.
In the facial expression, you can ask, how does that relate to the job? Or you can say, how does that relate to the job? You have to. It's not necessarily what you say, but how you say it. And if you say, I'm really I want to give you a good answer that's relevant. Can you help me understand how this is related to the job, my job performance, so that I can structure my answer accordingly?
Right.
That's a much general
Right,
way
but
of saying it.
some questions are actually relevant that you may not think. There's the BFOQ, bona fide occupational qualified questions, which have to be asked, like, how much can you lift? I mean, if the job involves some sort of manual activity, then they can ask certain questions. So you have to understand, what exactly the parameters are of the job, so that you can answer the questions.
And so, and to kind of bring it home, read the job announcement carefully.
Right.
Know what the job is, what the company does, because that would help you understand what kind of questions am I asking. And don't ever assume he's going to wing it. You just never know. Some employers like to play mind games with people during the job interview. They want to test you. They want to see how you react. Or is this person gets defensive if I ask him a question, that may not be expected. And so it's important to, particularly if you're not good at thinking on your feet, prepare. Go have someone do an interview prep session with you, so you feel comfortable answering certain questions and you're prepared. And particularly not if it's natural to you, because some people can go on a job interview and ask something and they can play it cool. Yeah, they can really go in there and wing it, play it cool, really connect, and deflect questions on the answer. And some people get really hot-headed, why are you asking me that? Or, and you have to moderate that. If you know that about yourself, you need more preparation, or if you get very nervous, you need to prepare, because you just never know who's going to be interviewing you. I've heard some wild things happen in the job interviews. So.
Well, we need to cut short the formal.
Just like a 5-second one here too is if at the end of all that, if there's no legitimate purpose of the question, nor is it a testing question about your stress reaction, if those questions are reflecting the culture of the company, then you can take that information away.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe not the job for you.
Yeah, who you want to work with.
Thank you. Edgar is very kind of you to offer to stay and answer questions one-on-one. Thank you for a terrific program.
Thank you. Thank you so much.